Welcome to the Sid City Social Club for Friday, February 19th. We're glad you're here. And I'm going to throw it to Sid.
Thank you very much indeed. I hope you're all keeping warm and watered and comfortable as best as possible in all sorts of different parts of the world where you may be going through the same sort of horrifying storms that are happening in the south of the United States at the moment. I hope you guys in Texas and neighboring states are doing well, as particularly. My best wishes. So I want to talk very quickly about something. I'm going to go away for a few weeks now. And I've got to go to Estonia. Well, if I can get there. The COVID testing thing before getting on the plane is proving to be remarkably difficult because you need to test no less than 3 days before you get on a plane, but tests take 1 to 4 days for you to get the results back. So it's a little dicey. So I know there are some birthdays today. Let's get cracking. And I'll promise not to say happy birthday twice to the same person like last time.
I don't think they mind that.
I am such a him.
That's okay. Yes, our first birthday is Vicky.
Hello.
Vicky, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Please, everybody, if you can, get off your mutes and say happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Vicky.
Happy birthday.
Happy
Birthday.
The sound, it never gets old. That's so great.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sid. I'm on here today because I have to show you what my husband made me for my birthday.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, he worked on this better part of 2 months, I believe.
And he made a box.
Good heavens! I'm sorry. I wish I could just do a flip here. It would be so much easier.
It's a beautiful box.
Switch camera. There we go. Oh, this is much better.
Oh, yes, that is much better.
He made a box.
Oh,
Good heavens.
Goodness. Look at that.
Yes.
It's a
That
cheese.
is- It's a cheese slicer and a cheese spatula. It's got a stainless steel grill there
my
for carving
goodness.
Parmesan, and a little cracker bowl that goes with it.
And turned in beautiful wood. He's a very, very talented. He's within earshot.
Yes, and he's going to be within camera shot if I have anything to say about it. Oh, he's being all shy.
Dude, you are brilliant. You're brilliant.
Sid says you're brilliant.
Thank you, Sid. I love you too.
Wow, that is quite something. That is something, I mean, that would be impressive, in a high-end store of some kind. That is just beautiful. Wow.
Yes, he touched up, he did a little bit of a finishing touch on the cheese slicer. And then a little bit later, when it dries, we're going to test it out on some various cheeses. And I can't wait.
That's really great. What a lucky person you are.
That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was ready to be pretty impressed by the box, but the box, I have a question for him. Does he? How do you? How does he do it? Is it a lot of taping and dyeing, because wood bleeds dye bleeds very easily through the grains of wood, so you can't just do that.
Sid wants to know how you keep the dyes from bleeding.
I don't. It's the color of the wood.
So
there you go.
Glued the wood together.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is way more impressive. Oh my goodness. No, that's fantastic, sir. That's a real epic job. Really terrific.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Very well.
He's bringing out the cheese. We've got Havarti. That's one of the ones I was trying to think of. Havarti.
Oh yeah, Havarti. Delicious.
Smoked Gouda.
Oh yeah, can't go wrong.
Yes, Chris is keen on that, and Wisconsin cheddar.
Oh yeah.
So yes, even California people like Wisconsin cheddar.
Absolutely. So you definitely like hard cheeses. Well, I'm gonna just impress upon you to try sheep cheese if you've never had it. It is very mild and delicious, and obviously if you're going to find it at all, it'll be of really high quality, because no one mass produces sheep cheese. So try it out. It's well worth it.
I am fond of brie and certain soft cheeses.
Oh, well, there are lots of, obviously, those things. I mean, I know that because I had a problem with cholesterol for about 20 minutes, it felt like, but it must have been enough for the doctor to go, hey, watch out, you've got cholesterol. And I was like, how can I possibly have a cholesterol problem? I'm the thinnest person I've ever met. Cheese is one of the problems for cholesterol. So but unless you go with goat or sheep, which gets you into the kind of other area, but that's just general knowledge for anyone who's interested in cheese. I had to look it up because and shrimp. I used to eat a lot of shrimp, and that wasn't good after a while. So that's fantastic. That's really great. Well, I'm looking forward to getting all kinds of excellent cheese and christening your cheese board and your
Yes.
flaker peeler. What would you call that? A Parmesan shaver.
Yes.
And your little snack bowl, which is going to be
Cracker
fantastic.
bowl, yes.
Almonds and crackers and whatnot. That's really cool. How is your family? Is everybody okay on the COVID front?
My brother-in-law and my mom both had it and recovered. My brother-in-law died in January of different causes, diabetes.
Yeah.
My mother has dementia and is still hanging on. I spoke with her yesterday, or not yesterday, the day before. She's doing fine. She's almost 92.
Wow, that's good going. Is she in a facility or is she?
She's been in a facility for 5 years. In fact, she was surprised when I told her that.
She didn't know. Of course, I guess
she didn't realize it had been that long.
That long.
She has that.
Right.
She has that sort of dementia where she doesn't remember what you told her 5 minutes later. There's so many different.
I don't have dementia. I don't remember things all the time that are short-term memory. I have no short-term memory. Sorry, I interrupted though.
Well, you and I are the same age, so I totally understand. I'm well into the walking into another room and forgetting why I did that phase of my life.
Absolutely. And watching a whole TV show and going, I think I've seen this before, but I don't remember any of it.
But when we're rerunning Deep Space Nine, that's a good thing. Because then you're enjoying it all over again.
It's true. It's so true. So what do you miss most about, because it's been so long now, we've all got used to this time, and we've kind of sort of adapted to life under COVID, most of us, and probably forgetting the things that we kind of miss and trying to get sorted out. We've just evolved into a sort of new life form, not new life form, new lifestyle. That would be pretty quite something. Is there anything that you can think of that you were like, were you big movie goers? Were you big sports fans? Is there anything that you just went, oh, I really, I would really love that again? Because I know people can go back to restaurants and stuff, although I wouldn't dream of it anymore. But
I miss game night with friends.
Yeah.
I haven't seen my best friend in person in well over a year, even though she's in Sacramento, so she's not that far away.
What did you play?
What do I play?
What did you play on game night? Or was it a sports game?
It wasn't a sports game, but I forget which gaming system it was on, but they had games like Fibbage. Oh gosh, Fibbage is so much fun. And then we'd play that and some of the Drawful, some games in a Jackbox packet. And then sometimes we'd go and play Cards Against Humanity, which was always always a politically incorrect gut buster.
I know. I find that so depressing because it's so ugly, the things that they have to say. I have played it once and I was just like so depressed. It's like, really? That's just an awful thing to say.
My husband and I are both former newspaper people, so we have 6 senses of humor because we have to laugh that we may not cry on a lot of occasions.
That's absolutely true. How did you meet?
College. We were both in the journalism department, Humboldt State University in the mid to late 1980s.
Wow. And when did you both kind of set out together to be journalists, or did you end up in the newspaper business together, or what? Tell me how that went, because that's really curious.
Well, we met at Humboldt State. We separately had decided to take that path. And well, shortly before we married, my husband got a job in the East Bay. And then we moved there from Sacramento. And then the next month I married, and the month after that, the sports department hired me. And then we worked together for about 18 years. I found a couple of online editing jobs that don't give me enough work. And my husband went into retail at what he calls his toy store, which is Home Depot.
I know.
Now,
That's
I
a
made the
twist.
mistake of saying that to my mom, and ever since then, her mind has fixated that my husband works at a toy store. So every time I call, she asks, "Is Chris still at the toy store?" And I have to tell her, "No, Mom, he's not at a toy store. He's at Home Depot, which is his toy store."
I completely understand the obsession with Home Depot. I'm very similar. Haven't been for a long time, but I used to go there just to look at different screws. I thought that was just fascinating. Anything specialist. I just was amazed by the different kinds of bolts and screws and obviously the machinery. But my goodness, I can totally empathize with that. So which was your favorite desk to work at?
When I got to features, eventually I got to do an entertainment page where I could write headlines that were clever and also could have a meaning that didn't have to be interpreted immediately by every other reader. And there were a couple of headlines that, well, impressed my husband. There was the time that we were writing about, there was a story about Dee Ramone, how he wanted to be buried. He had just died. And so the headline that I wrote for that was, "I want to be cremated." And Chris thought that was the most wonderful headline. I still can hear him laugh to this day.
Okay. That's a pretty good headline, actually. It is very witty, especially if it's coming out of his
Like
mouth.
I say, I've got a different sense of humor, and I was able to use that and a certain love of old Hollywood movies and some current entertainment. Entertainment's passed me by, but I'm still there's still some things I'm keen on that are relevant, that people might get the joke.
Well, I'm really impressed with what's your husband's name?
Chris.
With Chris's woodwork. I think it's just fantastic. When was your birthday? Yesterday or today or tomorrow? Or
It's
next week?
today. It is today, and I am selfishly glad that you were free to be able to wish me a happy birthday, because you've been one of my favorites for quite some time.
Thank you very much. Well, happy birthday, and enjoy the rest of it.
Thank you, Sid.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mel, for making this possible.
Of course. Happy birthday, Vicki. Okay, we're gonna do another, we're gonna see another mini presentation. Rob and Jackie are going to talk to us.
Thank you for doing this.
We just wanted to give this a bit of an airing, because obviously a number of us over the last few months, we would either say we either identify as or would have a disability. And we never really had an opportunity to kind of have a bit of a deeper discussion about it. So I think today, given that there are such a wide breadth of disabilities that we could talk about in different experiences, what we wanted to do is kind of give a little bit of a snapshot in just 7 to 10 minutes and hopefully give people an opportunity who maybe necessarily don't have a disability or don't identify with that to actually ask questions or kind of get a little bit of an insight into our world. And so this is what this first quote really is kind of designed to show. And it's from a guy called Richard Hammond, who many of you may know from Top Gear or the Grand Tour. And he actually went to my school. And he's had to spend time either using a wheelchair or kind of with various different impairments from different car crashes that he's been in. And as it says in the quote there, you broadly think that most things that could or should have been done for disabled people have been done, but then you spend time in that position and you realise that it isn't quite as cut and paste or as simple as you actually think it might be. So we really just want to kind of give you a flavour as we go on to the next slide, and Jackie's going to take over and talk a bit, and then I'll chip in with a few bits as well.
So one thing that a lot of people don't know is that we don't have actual marriage inequality, marriage equality. If you get married as a disabled person, you lose your benefits, you lose your health care, you lose any personal assistance that you are receiving. So your spouse is expected to not only provide all of the income, but also all of the care. And if you need 24-hour care, especially, that's basically important, right? It's basically impossible.
And then same as well for something like emergency evacuation sounds painful. But if you think to the last time that you stayed in a hotel, if there was ever a fire alarm there, most of you probably just would have walked out of the building along with everyone else. Or people with disabilities, particularly if you're a wheelchair user, we're often forgotten about with that. They may have things like evacuation chairs that are kind of situated at various different points around hotels. But quite often I've been staying in hotels and I've had to specifically check that they do actually know how to use those chairs, because quite often I've stayed in places where they haven't even taken them out of the wrapping or practiced actually using them. So quite often I've just been left on the third, fourth floor, whilst everyone else has been evacuated from the building, even if it's just a drill. So if you imagine yourself in that position, it's not a particularly nice feeling to have. So you actually have to check something like that literally anywhere you go, whenever you do kind of stay away from home. It's not always simple.
Also, to tag a little bit onto that, schools operate in much the same way. Disabled children are evacuated last or not evacuated during drills. Now, the social model of disability basically says that the way society is set up is what disables us, and that if society was changed, we would no longer be so disabled. It's not accurate. It is true that if society was reshaped, we would be a lot more able, but our disabilities still cause problems. Like, even if everything was ramps, Rob would still need a wheelchair, I would still need a cane. We're not completely free of them just if society changes. However, society could change a great deal, and we've seen some changes, particularly during the pandemic, with things being online and virtually accessible. And they've been really awesome, especially when they've been things that have been denied to disabled people in the past, like classroom accessibility. Unfortunately, some of them are already starting to be rolled back, and we hope that that doesn't keep going.
And the only problem with having things online is that actually people with disabilities, certainly in the UK, and I know it's more broadly worldwide, they are 20% less likely to actually have access to things like the internet, to be able to kind of access things like that. So they're already at a bit of a social disadvantage there. And if you wonder why things aren't changing particularly quickly, it's because the first kind of real protective laws have only really kind of come in the last 25, 30 years. So in the US, there was the Americans with Disabilities Act, which I think, Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong, was 1990. In the UK, there was the Disability Discrimination Act in 1995. And then there's been things like the UN Convention on People with Disabilities, which I think was 2006. And then the Equality Act, which kind of came in 2010. But even with all of those laws that have been kind of coming in over recent years, things are still very, very slow at changing. And there hasn't really been much before those at all. You'd have to, certainly in the UK, go all the way back to 1948 for the National Assistance Act, which tried to get more disabled people into work and absolutely failed spectacularly. Even the DDA in the UK in 1995 didn't do very much in terms of giving people more access just for simple things like being able to go out and shop and be in society.
And 1 in 4.5 there is because about 1 in 4.5 will experience disability in their lifetime, whether it's temporary or permanent. And there's not a lot of awareness about that. A lot of disability is seen as, like this little niche thing, but it happens in more people than you would think. Now, these are a couple of things not to do. To highlight them, like I have been in a restaurant eating a meal, and I've had my cane taken and moved away because the waitress thought that because it was pointing out a little bit, it was in the way. If a fire happens, I cannot get out of the restaurant without my cane. I would have been trapped. So I had to argue to get my cane back. Also on airplanes, most of the time I'm allowed to tuck it in between my seat and the wall, and that's why I sit in the window seat. But there have been a couple of times when the attendants have taken the cane, and unfortunately, if the plane goes down, I'm not going to be able to get my cane. I'm not going to be able to evacuate.
I think that kind of leads into the point about making assumptions, particularly about things that you might think are simple. So another example about getting onto a plane that I can give you is that I was I was asked if I wanted to go all the way up to the plane in my power wheelchair, because it's a very big and heavy thing, and sitting on another chair just is not comfortable for me at all, because I have things like custom backrests, cushions, things like that, and even not being able to sit on that for more than about an hour can cause quite a lot of problems for me. So I was allowed to go all the way up to the plane in my chair. 2 people then manually lifted me onto an aisle chair. They then dragged me onto the plane on this aisle chair, got up to my seat where I was meant to be on the plane, stopped about 2 meters short, and then looked at me and said, "Would you like to walk over to your seat now?" Not bearing in mind all of the stuff that had gone before that to actually get me to that point. And I looked at them and then said, "I can't walk over to the seat." And they just looked back at me and said, "What, you can't walk? Not at all?" "Nope, not even a little bit." That was their comment that came back. So I was a bit more flippant, shall we say, in those days. So I looked at them and said, "We're on a plane. Can you fly?" They went, "No." I was like, "What? Not even a little bit?" because what they'd actually asked me to do was, in effect, me asking them to fly. And they just have absolutely no idea that that wasn't possible for me at all. Once I'd actually said that, suddenly 2 and 2 twigged about everything that kind of gone in about the hour and a half beforehand. So, simple little things like, someone else might be able to walk 2 meters. For someone else, that's a bit like running a marathon or 10 marathons. So, simple things can obviously be quite difficult for some disabled people.
Yeah, if we hear to the last slide. That's basically how to, approach this differently, what to think about, what to see. And there we go.
That was actually wonderful. I mean, really, really fascinating. It's one of those things, one of those subjects that I don't spend enough time thinking about. And I personally myself don't know the answers to a lot of the questions that society in general have about this stuff. But I'm curious to ask you, what are the arguments that government has presented for not financing universal access and ease of use?
I mean, it would have to come up first. It would have to be presented by someone with power first, and it really hasn't been.
That's shocking.
Like we have, to get the ADA passed, there was a sit-in of disabled people for days. And actually I believe it was the Black Panthers who supported them through that. Kept them with food and water because they weren't being allowed to be supplied. Power was cut off.
Yeah.
And then there were also disabled people who pulled themselves up the stairs of Congress without their assistive devices to demonstrate the need for accessibility.
Yeah.
There's just not an awareness there among the people who tend to get in power.
Quite often it's more of a secondary thought. It becomes an afterthought. If you think about any new buildings that are built, and you just think, well, why not have complete step-free access so that everyone can access the building and you don't even have to think about it. But you look at any new design, they've always automatically got steps, and then you'll have a ramp to the side or something stupid like that. If you argue it from the business case, businesses will say, well, it must cost too much to make things accessible. I've done some work with an organization in the UK called Attitude is Everything, and they look at deaf and disabled access for gigs and venues back in the day when we could do that before COVID. And they put together a case that actually said, if you make your booking systems more accessible, because I think about 93% of people with disabilities will experience some sort of barrier when they're trying to access live music anywhere in the UK.
Yeah.
And they said, no, if you actually make your booking systems more accessible, it's not going to cost you more. You will actually increase your profits because disabled people have money to spend like anyone else does. And sure enough, they did that, and businesses were making about 10,000 times the amount of money that they'd actually invested just in making their systems more accessible. I think one venue managed to go from making, I think, £5,000 out of disabled bookings, and they increased that to about £140,000 in 1 year.
It's astonishing. I mean, it's astonishing to me that it's not a human right, not a disabled right. It's just a human one. Access, ease of use. Like, these are pretty easy concepts to understand. It's not complicated. I understand that the social, cultural issues, that's going to evolve at its own pace. You can't rush that. You can try and accelerate it, as various other groups have tried to accelerate understanding and awareness of their own minority status. But we all know, we're not naive. We know that people will have problems with disabled people for a long time. They'll be calling them the wrong things. They'll be patronizing you, talking to like children, etc. That will change once the infrastructure is universally recognizable and we understand. It's bizarre. It's bizarre to me because we're very good about looking after kids and making sure all their needs are met, but they're temporary kids. They become adults. And they need special assistance and special requirements and special facilities, and they're universally understood. And it just is totally puzzling to me. Sorry, I'm talking too much, but other people might want to ask a question, so I'm going to lay off, but thanks. Thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting us do it.
If anybody else has a question, feel free to come off mute and ask. One thing that really surprised me when we were talking about doing this presentation was the marriage inequality, that if you get married all of your any assistance that you have is taken.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
So it has to do with your last bullet point, which said volunteer. And so my son right now is in pre-K, and we have him in a private school because we didn't sign up for public school early enough, and you're not guaranteed a spot in the US. So he's in private right now. And our biggest complaint is that they don't have special education services at this private school that we know of. My son doesn't need services, but it's really important for me that he have an integrative experience with kids of all abilities. And so I talked to his pediatrician, and I called the local community center to see if they have some sort of unified programming, and I haven't really been able to find anything. So I'm wondering what the two of you would recommend, if there's any organizations that you know of that can provide, kind of that type of integrative experience, especially for younger kids.
I would be going back to the school. If the school are willing to have him there, that's your biggest battle. When my accident was when I was 16. I went back to the school that I'd been at for 8-9 years by that point. Okay, it was quite a well-off school, so they were able to do things, off their own back. But I went back there, and I was the only one there in a wheelchair. So I would say if the school are willing, that's half your battle. Get them on your side, and then everything else, hopefully, I would say would fall in place after that. But I would be going through them.
Thank you both. This was really great.
I had a question. You had mentioned reading books or articles or whatever by people who are disabled. Is there any in particular that you recommend?
Alice Wong has put out a fantastic book called Disability Visibility, and that's one that I would definitely start with.
For me, fundamentally, it's actually about listening to people's stories. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that you can do is just, as we said on the last slide, it's listening. It's learning from those stories and then kind of imagining, well, what would it be like if you were in that position? That real kind of empathizing and go from there. But listening to stories, I think, is the biggest one for me.
My question was, can you comment on, because the thing that I find most frustrating is when people say things like why do we have to make accommodations for this teeny group of people? But what I've found is that a lot of the times the accommodations that people make benefit more than just just disabled people. I was just wondering what were your thoughts on?
I think that's exactly what the Attitude is Everything campaign did in terms of increasing accessibility for people with disabilities to book. They were actually making it more accessible for the general population anyway, and so their profit margins kind of went through the roof, and that's just from a business case. So I would say it's a no-brainer really, but it's trying to convince them of that, because if they've done the same old thing for the last however many years, they just think that works for them.
Somebody was talking about the fact that a lot of what we see in late night infomercials, if anybody still watches any of those products, a lot of times were initially developed for or are a continuation of an evolution of products that were developed for disabled people. And now they're being sold to the general public. So for example, I don't know if any of you or maybe your parents had one of those rubber, like it's a rubber circle that you put on top of on a jar lid to help you open it. Gosh, that's so handy. Yeah, and it was initially developed for people with disabilities, with a physical handicap. So it's crazy when you start really looking at the products that are available through that, you can trace it back. So that's another argument for those who say, well, why should we make accommodations? Hey, look around your house, you're benefiting.
Things are marketed made on TV for able-bodied people because that keeps the costs down of for disabled people. Things that are marketed just to disabled people are often way more expensive because they're seen as specialized medical equipment.
One of the things that often happens around the conversation of disability and accessibility and that sort of thing is these feel-good stories of, somebody didn't have whatever and somebody's brother made it in the back shed with pipes. Or how do you get pushed into having the conversation? How can we have the conversation about how that sort of narrative is not helpful? And as much as it does give people the warm fuzzies, it does nothing to deal with the systemic injustices of the ways that such things come about in the first place.
I think, first off, if you approach it by reframing it and saying that this shouldn't have to happen, like it shouldn't be on their neighbor, And there are so many people who don't have neighbors who can't even do that, that might start to point it out.
I was just going to ask, what, as an able person, is your like pet peeve? What you and Rob, like, what are your pet peeves, things that people have done or keep doing that, as an able person, I can make sure not to do?
I put mine actually on the slide, like, don't touch the devices. I have people who just want to touch the cane because I have kind of cool looking canes. I like the look of them, but I'm using that to stand. And if you grab it or if you shake it, I'm at risk of falling, and falling is not fun. So please don't touch.
Yeah, the two for me really are, because I've got it's quite a powerful power chair, and I mean it's not as fast as my old one used to be. It used to do 10 kilometers an hour, and the number of people who just say, "Can I have a go?" And I'm like, "No, I'm using it. This is my. Can I borrow your legs?" You know, instead do as a bit of a swap, or the other one where they go and try and shake me by the hand, and I just look at it and I can't do anything with that. I'm just like, well, that's a lovely looking hand, but I can't do anything with it, and then they get mortally offended by it. I would say most people that I've actually met, I only keep in touch with about 3 or 4 people who knew me from before my accident. My best friend made that very mistake, but they got over it. So I think it's just thinking that we're mortally offended by everything. I'm not at all. So so long as you actually learn from it and you can actually show that you're coming from the right place in terms of, you know, willing to learn from that, I don't mind at all.
I really appreciated it. I feel like I mostly hear about disability from the autism community because I'm autistic. And so I talk with people in that community about it, and it's a very different perspective. I think with people with invisible disabilities versus people with ones that are more visible, like, you know, having to deal with people not touching your cane or your wheelchair and stuff. And it was interesting to hear what you had to say about it, because I feel like in that community, the social model of disability is seen as a lot more positive. But I've always kind of been skeptical of it. One thing I was curious about is what you meant with the, you know, putting the person before the disability, because I know that also gets into ideas in the disability community that are controversial, like should you say autistic person or a person with autism? I tend to prefer the first one. But I was curious what your thoughts were on that whole debate.
I can answer that one pretty quickly. When you introduce your friend to someone, do you introduce them by the list of things that are wrong with them, or do you introduce them as their name? If I had to introduce myself by the list of things that were wrong with me, I'd be doing it all day. So whenever I introduce myself to someone, I'm just Rob. I'm not a disabled person. I'm not a wheelchair user. I don't need 24-hour care. I don't list myself with all of those things. I just introduce myself as Rob and carry on as normal. So that rather flippant comment that I made a few months ago in the chat where someone said, you know, they can walk around a little bit, but they call themselves disabled. I'm like, well, I can't walk at all, but I call myself Rob. Simple answer for me.
And also, like, when you meet someone with a disability and it's visible, I have had people in the first 5 minutes of meeting ask what's wrong with me. I've actually had people just casually ask it. So don't do that. Get to know the person first. And if you're friends with them, if you have a relationship, it will probably come up. Don't just go straight for the difference, basically.
Be very careful of asking the question, what happened to you? Because once there's a time, it'll come back and say, I was born.
I think we should assume that everybody's just doing their best. If we started from there and just called everybody Rob, I think we'd be good. There's a lot of work to do. Well, thank you both so much. We really appreciate it. And if you guys have any further questions, they're in the chat. All right. We're going to go ahead and move on to Fiona, who is chatting for the first time, I believe.
Oh, great. Lovely. Nice to meet you, Fiona.
Hello. Are you excited to go back to work?
Yes, very. Absolutely. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to get there yet, but
yeah,
as long as I do, and I get through the little testy hurdles and all those things, then I'm really looking forward to getting back to work. Yeah. How are you? Where are you working?
Yeah, I'm still working. I'm in Australia, so we've been in and out of lockdown, mostly out of it. We were in a very brief lockdown last week, and
How did you find us? Have you been here? Have you been a lurker? for a long
I've
time.
been working since I think the very first one, and I think I found a link on Tumblr from people that I'm now friends with.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah.
And what made you just go, okay, let's have a chat. Let's see what how does this work?
So I figured I should suck it up and finally do it, because this is probably the last one I'll be able to attend because I'm going to school now.
Oh, what are you doing at school?
So I'm going to TAFE and I'm studying nature stuff. So I'm doing a conservation and land management course.
Timely.
Yeah, I know, right?
Absolutely.
Very timely.
Yes. And what's your area of interest? What particular, like, because it's such a wide-ranging subject now. We've got the marine guys, and we've got the native plant guys, and we've got all. I mean, or is it a very holistic, generalized area?
So the course I'm doing is mostly plant and land care based, but I'm hoping to focus mostly in native mammals and stuff because fuzzy animals are cute.
You've got the best. You know, my favorite Australian animal is the wombat.
Oh, really?
I don't think it's everybody's favorite. I just fell in love with that thing. I was in a zoo in the Blue Mountains outside Sydney, and I just saw one of these guys running around, and they said, well, we have to dig a fence up like 6 feet underground because these critters get out. They just throw around. And I thought they were the coolest animal.
Yeah, wombats are amazing.
Well, yeah, I'm with you. I held a koala bear too, which was kind of I felt a bit touristy doing that. I much preferred to just see the wombats there.
It's all right. Everybody does that. Even we do that.
How they smell so much of eucalyptus. I mean, whoa, that is a reeky smell. My goodness.
Yeah.
And how did you find why did you land on this particular thing? Was there some time in your life, or just a constant sort of sympathy for that side of life that you've always been like, interested in?
I think kind of constantly, like even as a kid, I was, I don't know, rescuing birds and running around outside and just being a feral child, and it sort of kept going. And then once we had the bushfires last year, I started volunteering at a local place, and I was like, all right, if I can volunteer for a year, it's time to commit to school.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Because you lost, I mean, billions of creatures during those bushfires. I mean, the number is astronomical.
At least. Yeah, at least. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Watching that all go down, like where we are in Victoria, we were pretty lucky. It was mostly across the border to New South Wales, but every day was just insane amounts of updates from that. And it's like waiting for this year. Summer at least has been a lot kinder.
Yeah. How do you go about rebuilding a population that has been as devastated as that in terms of the fauna?
With a lot of difficulty. Like the place I volunteer at is working on the eastern barred bandicoot, and the only way of kind of bringing that back is to crossbreed it with the brown bandicoot to increase like the genetic diversity, because otherwise you just get inbred animals and it's almost pointless at that point. So you just have to breed it with other things if you even can.
So you start school next year. Excuse me.
Next week.
Next week. Oh my goodness! Yeah. Get going. What are you doing here?
No.
That's fantastic. And this is a brand new experience for you. I mean, that is just such a cool thing to be doing. It really is. I remember the first few days of when I first went to school. So you're going to do mainly in native species, working on conservation, working on reproducing the species in terms of what area would that be? What are they going to try and teach you? What are they going to get into?
So the class that I'm doing is mostly obviously land stuff, but you kind of need good land to preserve things. So I sort of went with a land-based study because that's the thing that I have less knowledge in. So I was like, this is a good field to go into because that's where I'm going to learn the most. The animal things, it's like, I've learned a lot of that from home and from where I've been volunteering anyway. So I'm like, all right, focus on the area that you need more help with.
Yeah.
So
what were you volunteering?
I volunteer at a fence sanctuary with predator-free fences, and Mel is sharing.
Oh my goodness!
Thanks, Mel.
We've got cool stuff to look at. Awesome.
So those are eastern quolls.
The real name is a quoll, is it?
Yeah, that's a quoll, and that is Nelly the dingo. We take him for walks every morning with Chili, his sister. They're buttholes. They do not like being walked. Some days they're good, some days they're bad. It's curlews.
What are they called?
Curlews.
Curlews.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, curlews. We have those in
More baby claws, being adorable.
They are adorable. Dingai.
Yes. That was a good day. They actually wanted to walk that day.
That's cute. That is fantastic. Thank you. That is wonderful.
Some of the photos.
Oh my goodness, that's lovely. No, I can totally understand why you get into this.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's going to be hard work because it's a discipline. It's not just for people who happen to be sentimental. That's my dog trying to get in. Bingo here. Crazy too.
Aww.
Come on, Nina. Come on. You can come up. You can come up. She was in trouble earlier, so she's cowering. She's quite heavy now. But she looks
Aww.
a-
Yeah, I'm big.
Oh, you're big. You're big. Oh my God, she's attacking me. Right. It was fun for a minute. Whew, exhausting dog, that. She completely lost my train of thought, but it wasn't important. So, how is your family? How is your unit? Because I mean,
pretty good.
Even in Australia, you've been affected by this.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's pretty good. Most of my immediate family is in Adelaide, and they've kind of had the least outbreaks. They're just cruising along, living daily life, and every time we go into lockdown, they message me laughing about it.
Oh gosh, if only we were all living in that age.
Yeah. Dad will send me photos of going out to the pub, and it's like, thanks, Dad.
Yeah. Oh, I know what I was going to say. It's going to be a really hard working in conservation, obviously, because there's an enormous current against you. There are people who just do not care. But it's all interconnected, isn't it? I mean, care is a pretty universal word, but it works for just about every element. But you know, I mean, if we think of what Rob and Jackie were saying, and where you are, and what all of us, with all our different varieties of stuff happening in our lives, I mean, we're all disabled. All of us. I don't know where the line is that we start being abled and where it is where we start being disabled. And then we can see it as a human right. And our future is a human right. And looking after our fauna and our flora is part of that. So I'm just not really sure how to, I'm not eloquent enough to make a clear case.
No, but I get what you mean.
We need to change some laws is what we need to do. Despite the fact that my dog objects to everything.
He's having a great time. He's got stuff to say.
Look, I'm so happy you came on to talk, even though I did a lot of talking. But if you'd like to ask me any questions, you're more than welcome, because we've never chatted before. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Thanks for your input, Nina. We're going to go talk to Meredith next. This is also Meredith's first time, I believe.
Yes, it is. Hi.
Hi.
I'm really excited to talk to you for the first time.
Really happy that you're here. Thank you. Yeah. I'm sorry that this animal is creating havoc in the background.
My upstairs neighbor is apparently feng shuiing her apartment at 10:30 at night, so I've got the same thing going on.
Okay, so you're used to this. This isn't offending your ears. Nina, the name of my dog is Nina downstairs, by the way, and my wife has just gone out, so she's put in a crate because the alternative is furniture.
Exactly right, and now she wants attention, and nobody's there to give her attention.
Yeah,
exactly. I like the name Nina. It goes well with my dog's name, which is Sasha, but she's not here with me. She's back in the States. My mom is taking care of her, so unfortunately. But
that's interesting.
I'm from Arizona originally, but I'm in the Netherlands right now. I have been for the last 14 months. So
wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a change in your life.
Yeah, I moved here in January of last year to do my master's. And of course I moved just before the lockdown started. So it was a great idea to move abroad by myself for the first time ever. It was great timing on my part. I got halfway through the first semester and the lockdown happened and we moved to like doing all of our classes via Zoom. And I was like, well, this was perfect timing, wasn't it?
Goodness. So
I haven't made any friends. while I was here,
Exactly.
unfortunately.
You don't get the beauty of being in the Netherlands. You don't get to explore. You don't get to any of the sense of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I go on walks. I live in The Hague, and there's a lot of big parks here. So I live near the beach, and I live near a bunch of parks. So I have places to go walk, but everything is everything's completely shut down right now. Like we even had a curfew up until recently. So
there were riots, weren't there, in the Netherlands? Or was that, am I getting the wrong country? Was it? No, I think it was, or maybe it was Denmark. I'm not sure. One of those, maybe Belgium. I don't know. Sorry, forgive me. I should just be quiet and not just
here. Here in Germany, like a bunch of countries here having a lot of big problems, and like the vaccine isn't getting rolled out at all, and it's been a complete nightmare of a situation. But I finished my master's, so I did one good thing.
Oh,
so yeah,
my goodness!
I finished. I actually got my grade. My thesis just got graded earlier last week, so I just got my grade back on it, and I got a good grade. So thank God. I've been very nervous about it.
What you mastered in?
Well, I have a master's in colonial and global history. I was supposed to do my thesis on the impact of Dutch colonialism on American pre-Revolutionary War, period. But when the lockdown happened, I realized that was not going to work because I couldn't access any of the archives. So I switched my topic, and I ended up writing 19,000 words on Star Trek. So that was what I did. Yeah, I wrote an entire thesis on Star Trek. That was what I did.
How did you get away with that?
I had a thesis advisor who was a fan, and she was like, you know what, let's do it. I think you can make this work. The title of my thesis was, well, actually, I used a quote from Deep Space Nine as the title. The title was, "You can pulp a story, but you cannot destroy an idea. The history of socio-political critique in the Star Trek franchise." So, yeah. It was a fun thing to do. I got to spend the entire summer rewatching Star Trek episodes. So as it was research.
What does that do to you life-wise? Does that mean that you have to stay on this track, or can you go back to the colonial influence on American life before the American Revolution, etc.?
I mean, I could. I haven't really decided what I'm going to do for my, I'm looking for jobs and looking at PhD programs and not really sure where I'm going next. Everyone's like, oh, what are you going to do with this degree? And I'm going, don't ask me that question. I don't know. So I might go back to doing like traditional history stuff, but I'm really kind of interested in the influence of the interaction between pop culture and history a lot. And as a result, I may try to continue in that vein for my PhD, but I'm not really sure yet.
That's a very respectable thing. I mean, what can you put it in a nutshell? I mean, apart from the title, but what exactly is it that you wrote? 19.
So I wrote it actually over the course of only 2 months. The actual writing only took 2 months, which was amazing. But basically my thesis was that Star Trek started out with a coherent critique of every version of Star Trek was critiquing something in society at the time. But that over time, especially with Voyager and Enterprise, that they lost a coherent message of critique of society and became more of a reflection of society. Like Enterprise was very influenced by the xenophobia of the post 9/11 period and things like that. Populism was becoming a big issue in America at that point. And so basically all of my chapters are based around different political and social issues going on at the time. So I ended up writing a whole lot about the civil rights movement with the original Star Trek, and then basically post-Cold War ideology for Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, because it was very influential in that. And with Voyager, it was feminism. And then Enterprise, it was the issue of populism and anti-terrorism efforts and things like that. So
you could put it in another way. You could say that you chose to stick to Star Trek, but you really could be talking about how art reflects changes in social dynamics.
Yeah, that's really more what I was doing, especially with just science fiction as a genre, in totality. So I'm kind of thinking about expanding the thesis into something bigger eventually, maybe writing a book on the subject, because there's a lot of other science fiction, especially from the post-Cold War period, that I feel has a lot of social and political messages in it. So
absolutely. I mean, it's one of the only ways you can get a message across, especially today. Realism is pretty
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. A couple of years ago, I actually did a events at a local Comic-Con in Phoenix, and I did a panel where I discussed how Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5 are still relevant to political discussions today, because the stuff that was going on at that time period are still relevant. And it was really a lot of fun. I actually discussed it. Walter Koenig was at that convention that year, and I walked up to him when he was signing autographs, and I started telling him about it. He was like, "So did you talk about Babylon 5?" And I was like, "Yeah, I talked about Babylon 5." So wow. That was a lot of fun. He really enjoyed discussing that with me, and he was just like, "So what's your angle on politics? Who'd you vote for?" And I was like, "Well, I didn't vote for Trump." I was like, "Okay, good. I just had to make sure you were like taking this in a respectable direction." So that was a lot of fun.
I've met him a few times. He's a very unassuming man. Weirdly, you feel quite warm and fuzzy when he compliments you or he notices you.
Yes. Yeah, well, it made me feel warm and fuzzy after I got over being the initial terror, because the most recent show I'd watched him on was Babylon 5, and he terrified me like consistently throughout that. His character is so scary. And I walked up to talk to him, and I'm like, "Look, if I look terrified, it's just because Bester is in my nightmares at night." Like, so he was like, "No, I'm not like that. I'm friendly." And I was like, "Yeah, I figure you are, but I'm still scared of you." So that was a fun time.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So how do we get, is now you've finished, you've been graded, I'm assuming that this is available, you can make this available for people to read?
Yeah, it should be like I have to put it up in the like online library of thesis dissertations for the school, and now that it's up there, like once I get the email that it's up there, it'll be publicly available, so anybody can go and download it and read it, or I could email it to people, or anything I can do with it. So
maybe you email it to Mel or someone else who asks you personally.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So and I got an 8.2 out of 10, so I'm happy with that. Nobody ever, almost no one ever gets a 9 or a 10 on their thesis anyway here, so an 8.2 is spectacular.
That is epic. That's really spectacular.
I was very happy.
What is your plan after sort of, I mean, now you're footloose and fancy free. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Are you thinking now are you able to stay in Europe? I mean, that might be very interesting. Or
I can. Arizona? Yeah. Well, the Netherlands has like a orientation year visa. So if I want to sign up, I can stay for another year to look for a job or things like that. But I really want to see my family. So I'm thinking of going home. So my visa, my lease on my apartment runs out at the end of March. So I'm staying here until then, because I have to pay for it anyway, even if I leave. So, and then I'm gonna fly home to Phoenix and see my parents and friends and stuff like that, and then I don't know, move on from there. I've been looking at.
Is there a window of opportunity where you may return, pick up your visa again before it closes?
Yeah.
The only reason I suggest
anytime in the next 3 years I can do it. So
good. Well, I strongly recommend that you don't let it expire without going back and at least feeling that place without COVID hanging over you.
Oh, it'll be nice to do that. Maybe in like a year when things are back to normal.
Absolutely. I mean, apart from anything else, the freedom of work, of being able to work in Europe with that multiplicity of cultures.
Oh yeah, it is very interesting.
And America gives you all kinds of advantages.
Right. Yeah.
Don't let that window close.
Oh yeah, I've really thought about, like, I am looking for jobs in the Netherlands, but I haven't really found anything that quite like is right what I want to do. And my thesis advisor keeps emailing me PhD openings and being like, "Are you gonna apply for this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't have the qualifications for that." Like, my qualifications, and I don't have those.
Yeah.
Because I don't speak a whole lot of languages, and they want people with a lot of languages, and I never I'm bad at learning languages apparently. So yeah, just very
and
bad
there's
at it.
Ireland, and there's France, and there's the Netherlands. Of course, the Netherlands speak great English anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But so do a lot of those countries. The further central and eastern you go, the better the English is. And
yeah.
Spain and Portugal and Germany. I mean, Germany, they speak great English as well, but they like to hold on to their language.
Yeah, I have the two friends I have made here are actually Germans who were here studying, and they were just like, yeah, if you decide to move to Germany, you're gonna have to learn German. They're not gonna accommodate you. And I was like, okay, fair enough. It's really hard to learn Dutch in the Netherlands, actually, because as soon as they know that you're not from here, they immediately default to English, and they stop speaking Dutch to you, and you can't practice. So I can basically puzzle through what I need to buy at the grocery store, and that's basically all I know right now.
That's better than anything. I spent a few weeks in the Netherlands. I can't remember any of it. I used to laugh at some words. They were funny to me.
Some of the words hilarious. I once compared the Dutch language, and I'm probably going to offend somebody in the chat who is Dutch, but once compared it to if like a kindergartner in America made up their own language, because there's so many words that are similar in English and Dutch. I love that the word that one of my friends was like, what this word is, snowstorm, and I'm like, yeah, it means blizzard, snowstorm. And I'm like, it sounds like a fake word. I know it does.
It does. It's like, really?
It's real.
You want me to go in there and say we've got a snowstorm coming, and you
got a snowstorm,
laugh at me? Okay.
Exactly.
Setting me up, right?
It sounds like something my niece would come up with, and
Yeah, well, that's the price you get for being just lovely people.
Oh yeah.
Dutch. People can make fun of you, and you're gonna be okay with it.
Yeah, they're totally nice about it. I don't have a lot of Dutch friends at the moment, but like every Dutch person I've met has been nice. So yeah.
We've got a few Dutch people in the crew here. I mean,
I'd seen a few people that had been here. Like a couple of weeks ago, there was somebody on who was also living in The Hague, and I was like, oh look, we're in the same town. We're just like, we're probably only miles apart from each other.
Have you been out of the place before for a long period? Is this the first time?
This is the first time I've been out of the country for a long period, and to be honest, it's the first time I've been further than a state away from my family for longer than a few weeks. So,
do you feel it's changed?
We're pretty close knit family. So,
do you feel that it's changed you in any way?
But yeah, I do feel like I'm a little bit more able to handle things a bit better. Like my first apartment here, we had a mouse problem, and I was horrified at first, and then I was like, you know what, I can handle this. It's fine. They're just nice. They're more scared of me than I am of them. Like, I don't have to jump up on top of a table and scream. I can handle this.
Well, it's been a real pleasure to hook up.
Very much
and
so, yeah.
Glad you did. And I just hope you get all the best coming back in March.
Yeah.
Hopefully you get to see your family in the right way, and it's not kind of got crazy, because you might be jumping out of the frying pan into the fire.
It's great to talk to you.
All right, thanks, Meredith. And hey, do send me the link when your thesis is available so that we can get it out, because there's a lot of people in the chat who want to read it. Okay, before we go, I have a short video to share. The full video is available on the Sid City YouTube page, but this is a little teaser of something that we've talked about a few times, and I thought it might be appropriate as Sid's getting ready to jump on a plane and head off to work. So let's
Oh. that mad person away.
That would be Rob Moriarty.
It was great fun. That was really fun.
Together. The long version is available at youtube.com/Sid City if you like.
So funny.
So, on that cheerful note, we will wish you all farewell.
Absolutely. Have a great time.
As Sid mentioned, he is off on a jet plane at some point next week, but we will continue to have the social club meetings. We'll keep the light on, keep the chair warm, and we'll miss you while you're gone.
I will call in like everyone else.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Guys.
Safe travels, Sid.
Thank you.
Have a great time.
Safe trips. Be safe there, Sid.
Safe travel.
Weekend, safe trip.
Take a sketchbook.
Time.
Thank you very much.
Stay safe.
Don't die.
Bye.
No.
No dying. No dying.